NFL training camp is just around the corner. This is my favorite time of the offseason because when training camp comes around, that means that we're almost close to the start of the NFL season. Now, I wanted to give you guys some of my thoughts on the Pittsburgh Steelers going into training camp, some players that I'm going to be watching, some key position battles to keep your eyes on. Now, training camp for the Steelers kicks off on July 26th. So make sure that you guys keep that date in mind if you look at maybe attending a couple of training camp sessions. So the first thing that we all are going to be having our eyes on is the quarterback battle between Kenny Pickett and Mitchell Trubisky. Now, at the moment, according to multiple reports out there, Mitchell Trubisky is QB1 heading into camp. Now, many people think that this is Mitchell Trubisky's job to lose. However, Mike Tomlin and offensive coordinator Matt Canada have came out several times and said that this quarterback battle hasn't even been decided yet. Kenny Pickett during minicamp wasn't really being evaluated all that heavily. All he was really doing was getting his feet wet, learning the facilities, where everything is at, getting acclimated to the playbook, doing installs. So training camp is really when this quarterback battle is going to begin. Now, you guys already know my thoughts on this whole situation. I'm rooting for Kenny Pickett to be the starter. He was a first-round pick for a reason. He was labeled as the most pro-rated quarterback. I feel that he gives the Steelers the best chance to win. But if Mitchell Trubisky ends up beating out Kenny Pickett, then I trust Mike Tomlin's judgment. The question just is, how long will Trubisky remain the starting quarterback for the Steelers? Now, there are a lot of non-Steeler fans who have hit me up and said that, oh, JT, Kenny Pickett was currently listed as the third quarterback on the Steelers depth chart. Isn't looking good for your boy. Listen, don't pay any attention to that. Just because somebody ranks third on the depth chart doesn't mean deadly squat. Because I believe when Big Ben got drafted years ago, what was he, third or fourth on the depth chart? So for Kenny Pickett, he's only third on the depth chart because Mike Tomlin is trying to make him earn his spot on the team. If Kenny Pickett ends up becoming the starting quarterback for the Steelers week 1 against Cincinnati, it's not because Mike Tomlin and company gave it to him because they used a first-round pick on him. He earned it. Same thing with Mr. Trubisky. So for those people who are out there and saying that it's Trubisky's job to lose, I kind of got to look at you with the rock eyebrow because Mike Tomlin doesn't just automatically give people starting jobs. You have to earn it. So I'm really interested in seeing how this quarterback battle plays out. The offensive line. Now, if you are somebody who is worried about the offensive line going into this season, you're probably going to remain worried because there's not really going to be too many position battles happening. The offensive line pretty much is set. Dan Moore is going to be getting the nod at left tackle this year. Now, last season, he was a rookie, and I guess the Steelers see a lot of potential in him. But he needs to improve in a lot of areas of his game. His pass blocking needs a lot of work because you guys remember what Myles Garrett did to this guy. It wasn't pretty. He also needs to improve run blocking as well. But hopefully he develops pretty well throughout training camp. Kevin Dodson is going to get the start at left guard. He was the Steelers' best offensive lineman last year. I don't know if that means much when you consider how bad this unit was. But it is word for thought that Kevin Dodson is pretty good. I expect him to take a tremendous leap forward this year, and maybe he could end up being a potential Pro Bowler. Now, you signed James Daniels in the free agency. It was one of the Steelers' biggest free agency acquisitions over the course of this offseason. He was the Chicago Bears' best offensive lineman for over the last couple of years. So he definitely is going to be a tremendous improvement at right guard compared to the play that the Steelers got from that position last year from, who was it, Trey Turner? Then at right tackle, you're going to have Chuks Okorafor, who the Steelers recently re-signed to a 3-year extension worth $30 million. And a lot of Steelers fans were really upset with this signing. They felt that the Steelers tremendously overpaid for Chuks. But I mean, it isn't a deal that the Steelers are going to have a hard time getting out of. So after this season, if they decide to go in a different direction, they could find a way to move some things around and get out of this deal without facing a lot of cap penalty. Now, the thing with Chuks Okorafor is that he only gave up 2 sacks, so he was pretty good in pass protection. However, he had 11 penalties, which was tied for the second most out of any starting offensive tackle last year. And he also isn't really good when it comes to run blocking. So if he can improve his run blocking and cut down on the penalties, then hopefully he could be a pretty solid right tackle. But some people are going to say, well, JT, the Steelers didn't really have that much time to throw the football. Big Ben was throwing the football on an average of 2-point-something seconds. So we didn't really get to see just how good Okorafor is in pass protection, which I do understand that. But most of the time, I don't really think that Chuks was all that bad in pass protection. I think that the run blocking is probably the part of his game that needs the most work. Now at center, this is pretty much the only position battle that we have at the moment when it comes to the offensive line. And this is the most important position because the center position is pretty much the quarterback of the offensive line. 9 times out of 10, if you have a really good center, you're going to have a really good offensive line. And if you don't have a really good center, your offensive line is most likely not going to be all that good. Now, the Steelers don't really have any promising candidates when it comes to this potential starter at this center position. It's going to be between Mason Cole and most likely Kendrick Green and whoever else they decide to bring in and throw into the fire at that spot. Now, Mason Cole was signed in free agency. He spent a couple of years with the Arizona Cardinals, and he spent last season with the Minnesota Vikings. Now, I've talked to a lot of Minnesota Vikings fans, and the majority of them said that Mason Cole is a solid backup, but if you need him to be your starter, then good luck. And when you look at Mason Cole, he is a pretty solid run blocker, but he's not all that great in pass protection, which is something that if you're a Steelers fan, you're shaking your head and you're saying, oh no, JT. And I said the same thing when a lot of Vikings fans were telling me that. And when I watched a couple of games, when the Minnesota Vikings played the Green Bay Packers, wasn't pretty. So for Pittsburgh, you're getting somebody who's going to help you out in the run game, but he's really not going to give you all that much when it comes to pass protection. Now, me personally, with what I've heard and what I've seen from Mason Cole, I'm rooting that Kendrick Green can develop over the course of training camp. He's been spending some time down in Florida with the Pouncey brothers. Now, he hasn't been really doing any on-the-field workouts with them, but I guess they've been kicking him some game. They're kind of like his OGs that he gets advice from, that he looks up to. So hopefully they gave him some advice on how to improve as a center overall. And hopefully he can end up starting and being an improvement, because I don't really have a lot of confidence in Mason Cole. I don't understand what the Steelers were thinking by signing him, unless he was brought in to be a depth piece. But I mean, come on. We know how important the center position is. And I really don't understand why the Steelers would lowball at a position that's so important. So I'm extremely worried for the center position. And I really don't think this offensive line is going to be all that improved because of how important this center position is. Because the key to having a great offensive line all starts at center. And if you don't have that, your offensive line is already at a disadvantage. So hopefully Kendrick Green can end up winning out and improving, being better than what he was his rookie season. Because you got to remember, when he was drafted in the 3rd round out of Illinois, he was viewed more as a project player. And he was more of an offensive guard. So center wasn't really his natural position. He just had a little bit of experience playing center, but he had more experience playing guard. So he was still trying to get acclimated to the position. Hopefully he takes a tremendous step forward during training camp, but that's just wishful thinking on my part. Wide receiver, we already know about Deontay Johnson and Chase Claypool. everybody wants to know about these new shiny toys that the Steelers got in the draft, and George Pickens from the University of Georgia and Calvin Austin from Memphis. Now, George Pickens drafted round 2 of this past year's draft. He's a freak. He's 6'3", 195 pounds. He is a bigger and more skilled version of Martavis Bryant, in my opinion. You ask somebody who can get up and get those 50-50 balls. He can catch the ball through traffic. He's also really good after the catch. And then you have Calvin Austin. Calvin Austin was a 4th-round selection out of Memphis. He's undersized, so without a doubt, he's going to be a true slot receiver, but he's 5'8", 170 pounds, but he can move. He ran a 4.32, and he looks a lot faster than that in game. He also is a pretty solid route runner. He's pretty good when it comes to creating separation off the line. Now, if he gets matched up against a bigger, more physical slot corner, then he could find himself in some trouble. But we're most likely going to be seeing him used a lot in Matt Canada's offense as the guy who gets brought in motion, getting the ball on jet sweeps, handoffs, bubble screens, all that kind of stuff. So for Calvin Austin, we also potentially could see him returning kicks or punts. Even though the Steelers did bring in Gunnar Olszewski, that is another position battle to look out for. So when it comes to George Pickens, he is going to be probably used as a big slot. That's what I've been hearing a lot coming out of minicamps when it comes to Pickens' utilization in this offense. And him and Chase Claypool are also going to spend some time rotating in and out. Sometimes you may see Chase Claypool line up at a different position, and you may see George Pickens line up on the outside at where Chase Claypool normally plays that out. So for George Pickens, when Mike Tomlin was asked about him, he said that George Pickens has a lot of talent, but he's still very raw and needs a lot of development. But of course, you already know Mike Tomlin loves to coach. So he said that's what the coaches are here for. We're here to help these players develop and reach their full potential. So don't be surprised if you see George Pickens have a tremendous impact right away. Because I don't know what slot corner in the NFL will want to have to guard this big behemoth in the slot, but good luck. And most starting slot corners aren't really all that big. The average height of a starting cornerback in the NFL is 5'10", maybe 6 foot if you're lucky. So when Cincinnati ends up facing off against Pittsburgh and Mike Hilton, our former Steeler, our beloved former Steeler, ends up having a matchup against George Pickens in the slot, really interested to see how that matchup goes. Because for George Pickens, this is somebody who is incredibly physical. He's a really good blocker in the run game. And on top of that, if he can improve his route running, he could become a true all-around wide receiver for Pittsburgh. And I think that he could potentially end up becoming better than Deontay Johnson. Deontay Johnson is really good, really skilled route runner. However, George Pickens, with the size and the athleticism, he has a little bit more potential than Deontay on the outside. You also have Conner Heyward, who is the younger brother of Cam Hayward. He is a tight end / fullback who was drafted in the 6th round out of Michigan State. And he had a pretty good minicamp. He caught a one-handed pass from Kenny Pickett in a 2-minute drill. So can he beat out Zach Gentry for that tight end 2 spot? And on defense, I'm looking at rookie defensive lineman Marvin Lill out of Texas A&M. Now, he was drafted in the 3rd round. He can play both D-end and defensive tackle. However, I think that he's better at defensive tackle because I think that his athleticism at the position allows him a little bit more leeway to get into this Pittsburgh Steelers starting rotation. Because right now, you only really have Tyson Alualu, Chris Wormley, and Larry Ogunjobi. Now, Ogunjobi is coming off the best season of his career with the Cincinnati Bengals. He has 7 sacks. He's also pretty good against the run. But Tyson Alualu is pretty much a really good run defender. When it comes to passing downs, he doesn't really bring you that much from a pass rush standpoint. So we could see Marvin Lill, with a good training camp, end up being a little bit of a factor when it comes to the pass rush rotation. At linebacker, we're all going to be watching Myles Jack and Devin Bush, especially Devin Bush coming off that ACL injury that he suffered the year prior to last. He didn't really look like himself in 2021. Hopefully, with the hiring of Brian Flores as the linebackers coach, he's going to be able to get Devin Bush back to playing how he was prior to his ACL injury. He also signed Myles Jack in free agency. I was really excited about this signing. Myles Jack, before Urban Meyer arrived in Jacksonville, was pretty much a top 5 middle linebacker or top 5 inside linebacker in the NFL. He has good coverage skills. He's also pretty solid in the run game. And if the Steelers defense is going to improve when it comes to stopping the run this year, the linebackers are going to be a huge part of that. A huge part of that. So the last player that I'm going to be watching is going to be cornerback James Pierre. Now, James Pierre made a lot of noise throughout training camp during 2020, which was pretty impressive considering the fact that you didn't really have a lot of opportunities to show what you could do. You had limited reps because you had no preseason. And on top of that, James Pierre was undrafted. Now, I may be a little bit biased because he comes from the current university that I attend, Florida Atlantic University. So I'm going to be rooting for James Pierre. So he's somebody who is kind of just somebody that I'm going to be looking out for from a personal standpoint, just because I have intrigue in him because he's a FAU alum. Got to support my FAU alumni. So I'm looking out for him. He could be a pretty good depth guy. I didn't really think that he was all that bad when he stepped in. He did have some down moments, but I also feel like he does still have a good amount of promise. So I know that he's not going to crack the starting lineup or anything, but he's still is fighting for his spot on this roster, kind of. So let me know what you guys think of the Pittsburgh Steelers heading into training camp. What are some players and position battles that you guys are going to be looking out for? Let me know down in the comment section down below. Are you going to be attending training camp for the Pittsburgh Steelers? Let me know what day, what time.